All right, hello and welcome back. Oh, no clapping, okay. Hello and welcome back. Bug. Train. You know what, it is just too noisy on my street. We're gonna close the window. All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of How to Write a Sentence. My name is Deidre and I will be teaching you creative writing step by step. Creative writing is extremely difficult and really overwhelming, so my hope with this series is to help you get comfortable and learn it piece by piece. That way you're not overwhelmed and you don't just sit at your computer or your piece of paper and just give up. So far we've looked at basic sentences, we've looked at verbs and adverbs, which is basically your actions. We spent a whole lesson on description words, otherwise known as adjectives, and we looked at point of view, first person, second person, and third person points of views in writing. And today we're going to be looking at sentence lengths. And so you might be asking, why is a sentence length important? And the reason for that is the sentence length controls your pacing. And pacing is extremely important in fiction writing, but it's also extremely difficult. So pacing is actually an advanced writing technique. You will be working on pacing for probably your entire life. I like to think of it kind of as rhythm when you're dancing. Not everyone is born with it, and most people are very unnatural with it. But in order to dance well, you must learn rhythm. And the first way you learn rhythm is by counting. And once you learn counting, you can do the more advanced things with rhythm. I know this personally. I've been taking dance lessons. My rhythm is atrocious. So I used to take like bachata and salsa lessons in Daegu. And after lessons, they would open the club up and then it would be just like club dancing with bachata and Latin dancing. And I actually had someone after a dance lean over and say, "Can you hear the beat?" Like, my rhythm is that bad. But my pacing in writing is really good. Now, even as an advanced writer, someone who has been writing for more than 20 years, as someone who took classes on writing, as someone who has published 2 books, as someone who is a certified ESL teacher, I mean, that's not really related, I'm just throwing in my credentials just so you know, I still have to focus on pacing and I still have to correct my pacing. But I want to give you a taste of pacing because it's so important in your writing. And the first step, the 1, 2, 3, 4 of pacing, is your sentence lengths and the variations of them. So today we'll be looking at sentence lengths and their uses, controlling and improving pace, and common problems with sentence lengths. So there are 3 types of sentence lengths: short, medium, and long. Now there isn't really a good definition of short and long. Some people might say a short sentence is less than 5 words and then a long sentence is more than like 15 or 20 words. I think that's a good definition. However, I probably wouldn't make it completely about the amount of words in your sentence, even though that's a really good definition. I would also include how many types of pauses you have, such as commas, colons, semicolons, things like that. Now, if those were just like a bunch of confusing words to you, don't worry. I'm actually going to go over punctuation, such as colons and semicolons, in my next lesson. But today, let's just focus on short, medium, and long sentences. I would say that a short sentence is probably less than 6 words with no pauses. I would say a long sentence is more than 15 words, which actually is not too difficult, but more than 15 words, usually there's a lot of commas in there somewhere. So let's look at short sentences first. Short sentences are usually used for action. They are used for fight scenes, for tense scenes, to create suspense, things like that. And then short sentences will also be used for drama. You can use them for times of character realization, you can use them for plot twists, something highly emotional, and then you can also use them for comedy. The best comedy is a short jab, something that's quick and snappy. So let me give you a few examples of how you would use a short sentence. First one is action. I turned hard left. There was nothing but a dead-end alley. No exits. So you can see that the first sentence, I turned hard left, is only 4 words. The last sentence is no exits. The one in the middle doesn't have any pauses, but it's technically not really as short because there are 3, 6, 8 words. So it's not really a short sentence anymore. I would consider it a medium sentence. And then drama. His eyes shifted to the side as he avoided the question. I was suddenly sick to my stomach when I realized why. He wasn't going to save them. he planned this. So you can see with the drama, you need a little bit of a setup, and then you use the short sentence as kind of the punchline. And speaking of punchlines, you can use it for comedy. So, think I've stopped thinking, I replied. He chuckled. Does it suit you? Not thinking? The castle. So this is just kind of quick dialogue, and it is supposed to be kind of quirky banter, so I'm going to keep it short. I'm not going to keep it very long. Now, you can't just have short sentences all the time. Even in an action sequence or a drama sequence, you need to have long and medium sentences to balance them out. So let's go over long sentences and their uses in your story. So for long sentences, you will use them for descriptions. All right, so if your character comes to a new environment, or if they're describing people, if they're describing their emotions, you'll want to use longer sentences, as well as reflections if they are processing their thoughts, if they're trying to solve a problem, if they're taking in information. And you'll also use long sentences in flashbacks. When your character is having a flashback, usually nothing important is happening in that time, at least it shouldn't be. You should not be doing a flashback when they are having an action sequence or when things are really dramatic. You should not be taking the time to flash back to something else. So a long sentence can be really good for flashbacks. Let me give you some examples of how you can use a long sentence. For descriptions, from the top of the mountain, we could see the city lights cutting into the darkness for miles. The 3 surrounding cities offering their shine as a reward for hiking so high in the middle of the night. So I used a semicolon in this sentence because the second part of the sentence is connected to the first, and a period would have a different effect on this sentence. So instead of stopping, I just continue. That makes this an extremely long sentence. And for reflections, my mother could talk and talk and talk until not only she had forgotten your original question 20 minutes prior, but had also skipped 6 topics ahead, so it was impossible for you to go back and ask your question again. So again, this is a reflection about the personality of the character's mother. So because it's a reflection, we can take the time to make the sentence longer and the pacing a bit slower. And the last one, flashbacks. It was just like last summer when they had gone on vacation and she had forgotten to pack extra clothes only so she could wear his clothes instead. So this is a quick flashback. It doesn't give us the whole scene, which sometimes you don't need in a flashback. Flashbacks are one of my pet peeves as a writer. They are extremely dominant in romance novels, and they are extremely dominant in the worst times in romance novels. Now, flashbacks you have to be extremely careful with because you want to keep the reader in the moment, but you're also recalling something from the past. I see flashbacks done badly much more than I see them done well, and a lot of the times they're just used too much. If you're interested, I'd love to do maybe a video on flashbacks. Let me know if you think that would be useful to your writing, and I would love to rant further about bad flashbacks, but I'm going to try to keep focused on the lesson of today. So medium sentences will be everything that is not a short or long sentence. Now, the bulk or the meat of your story will probably be medium sentences, and that's fine as long as you balance them out with short and long sentences. So you'll use medium sentences for character actions when your characters are moving, when they are doing something, things like that. For linking sentences together, to link a long sentence to a short sentence or vice versa, and just generally everything. A medium sentence is most of your book. So the reason we use short and long sentences and medium sentences is to control your pacing. So let's talk about pacing a little bit further. Now remember, I said this earlier in the video, pacing is an advanced writer skill. It's a critical part of your writing, but it's also the most difficult. It takes years to learn well, and you have to take the time to learn it. And also, pacing is going to be contingent on your genre and your scene type in your book. If you have an action scene, it's going to be different than a romance scene. If you have a romance scene, it's going to be differently paced than a tragic scene. And overall, if your book is a romantic comedy, it is going to have a different style and pacing than if you are writing a gothic mystery novel. So part of becoming a writer is learning which type of pacing is good for which scene. So a good way to think of pacing, the easiest way I can explain it, is pacing is like like breathing. So if you have a long sentence, it's like taking a deep breath. If you have a short sentence, it's like taking a short breath. If you have too many long sentences, it's going to be like meditation. If you have too many short sentences, it will be like hyperventilation. So too many long sentences, your reader might fall asleep. Too many short sentences, they might pass out, mentally speaking. So let's look at a scene from my book, The Five Princes. Now, The Five Princes is a romantic comedy, but the main character is also a karate student, and there are a lot of action scenes, but they're very lighthearted action scenes. But in this scene, I have tried to combine as many short sentences and long sentences that I can that is adequate for this type of scene. So let's look at this scene together, and then I will break down why I did each sentence the way that I did. There was a flash of light and the sound of firecrackers. People scattered. There was screaming again. Another car engine. "Come on," Evan yelled. We raced down a side street, heading back towards the main street. A car blocked the exit in front of us. Another car blocked the entrance we had come in. A third car blocked the side road next to us. Evan squeezed my hand. The passenger doors of the car opened, two men getting out of one car, and one each getting out of the second and third. "I think I have to handle this now," I told Evan. I dropped his hand and raised both of mine to my face. Alright, so that was an action sequence. It was a little bit short, but let me show you how I balanced out the sentences and the pacing. So I have highlighted my sentences here. The peach-colored ones are the short sentences. The teal ones are the longer sentences. And the blue sentences I've highlighted because even though they're not short sentences, there's no pausing in them, which means they feel quick even though they aren't short. So as you can see, people scattered, 2 words. There was screaming again, 4 words. Another car engine, 3 words. And they're very, very quick. And then the first teal sentence is, we raced down the street, heading back towards the main street. I really don't like that I used the word street in both halves of those sentences, but it went through a line editor, it's been published, it's done, we can't go back. I probably would have changed it to, we raced down a side road or side alley. But welcome to writing, where you publish things and then you read it later and go, oh, that was the wrong word choice. And then I have 3 quick sentences that are not short, but they are good for an action sequence because there is no pausing. A car blocked the exit in front of us. Another car blocked the entrance we had come in. A third car blocked the side road next to us. So they feel fast. They don't slow down the pacing whatsoever because there's no commas, there's no breaks. Even though those sentences are between 9 and 10 words each. And the longest sentence that I put towards the middle of this chunk, the passenger doors of the car opened, 2 men getting out of one car and one each getting out of the second and third. Now, this particular sentence is slowing down the pace so my reader doesn't hyperventilate and pass out. And it's also a description sentence. It is telling you what is happening, what the character is seeing. Now, when you have an action scene, you don't want to use too many long sentences because usually if you are in a fight or you're scared or something like that, you don't have time to like think and reflect and intake information. If this was a romance scene, it would look a little bit different, but I just wanted to focus on an action scene for now. So if pacing is an advanced skill, how exactly do we improve? Well, the first and most obvious way to improve your writing in any element would be to read. You must read multiple genres and multiple scenes within those genres, taking mental note of how the author paces each of their sentences. Now, we all have our favorite styles of writing, and maybe that's the one we want to emulate, but in order to have well-balanced writing, you have to go outside of your genre just to study. Even if you can't finish a whole book, which is totally fine, I wouldn't recommend wasting your life reading a whole bunch of stuff you hate. Although there is a lot to be gained from reading stuff that you hate as a writer. I would say every once in a great while, maybe once every 3 months or once every 6 months, something like that, take some time to read outside of your genre. Who knows, maybe you'll really enjoy it. If you hate it, that's fine too. The idea is to learn how to pace your sentences and taking mental note of how other writers do their craft well or not well. Another way to improve your pacing is to write multiple versions of the same scene. So if you're a beginning writer, what I would recommend doing is taking your page or your scene and then writing it as many different ways as you can think of. Maybe just start with 1 paragraph, don't do too much because that's just stressful. But take a paragraph, try to change up the sentence lengths and pacing, and after you've done that, try to decide which paragraph, which pacing fits the scene the best. This is why why we write rough drafts, because the rough draft is just us getting the scene out, and then editing is going back and changing the pacing. Another thing, if you're a beginner, I would recommend trying this, is highlighting your sentences. You can do what I did and you can highlight the colors in your word processor, or you can print it out and use a highlighter. I used to do that when I was first starting out. I would print off my chapter and I would actually highlight different pieces. I would highlight the dialogue to make sure there was enough dialogue but not too much, or I would go back and I would highlight descriptions to make sure there was enough descriptions. But you can also use this with your long and short sentences. You can make one color your short sentences, one color your long sentences, just to see how you balance it out. You don't have to do this for your entire piece or your entire book, but doing it in one scene, maybe where something feels off, go ahead and try it. And the fourth way to improve, and probably the most important way to improve, is to have peer review. I hate to tell you this, but you can't write alone. You need to have a community of people who will give you good feedback. I don't mean your friend who will read your book and be like, yeah, that was awesome, great job. I mean someone who actually knows the craft and takes it seriously enough to tell you how to improve. This is the scariest part of being a writer, is giving it to people and have them critique it and give you feedback. But you also have to know this is the best way to become a better writer, and it's pretty much impossible for you to become a good writer without feedback. You need to learn how to get that thick skin. So first, I recommend that you get a writing partner, someone who is either a teacher or a beta reader or a solid friend who cares really about the writing craft, and have them give you feedback on the pacing of your scene. Now, sometimes you're not going to have any choice but to pay for an editor, but honestly, I've had so much good feedback from editors that I would never get from my friends or peers or beta readers or anyone else. So that might be the bullet you have to bite. Or you can go online and try to find a writing partner there. There are a couple of websites where you can get peer feedback. There's actually a website called Scribophile. You can go there and they basically let you post a piece of your scene and people will give you feedback. And the more feedback you give other people, the more scenes you can post. So it's kind of a trade-off. It's also a pretty good website. I don't go on it as often anymore just because I'm really busy and I don't really have time for forums. But it's a great way if you're stuck on a scene and you need some feedback and you don't have any money for an editor and you don't have any friends who are good at writing. So now let's take a look at common mistakes people do with their pacing. So first, I'm going to give you a sample paragraph the way I would probably most likely write it before it goes to an editor and they fix it. But let me give you a sample paragraph and then let me show you how you can jack it up. So this is another action sequence. There was a crash. My heart beat hard in my throat as I waited. Another creak. I clenched my fists and ran towards the sound, too scared to breathe. Okay, so this is probably how I would write it. My editor would probably fix the pacing. This is why you get a line editor. Your line editor will make things more consistent. So one way to mess this up is to have repetitive lengths. So this is when you use sentences that are the same length too many times in a row. There was a crash, a moment of silence. There was another creak. I clenched my fist. My fist beat rapidly. I ran towards the sound. I was too scared to breathe. I got really bored reading that, and it wasn't really that long. So all of these sentences are about 4 or 5 words long. It's really repetitive. It's really boring. So you don't want to write your sentences the same length every single time. Another way I could totally mess up this paragraph is by using the wrong pace. You have to make sure the pace suits your genre and scene. There was a crash and a moment of silence, making my heart beat in my chest rapidly. I listened and listened until I heard another creak. When I did, I ran towards the sound with my fist clenched. So the sentences aren't bad. Maybe, I don't like them, but they're not terrible sentences, but they're really not good for an action sequence because an action sequence needs quick, snappy sentences. Things are happening, you need to go. At least one of these sentences needs to be really short. And then another problem is just being too wordy. Now this is a problem that a lot of people have when they're a beginning writer or if they're a writer with something to prove. Remember that part of your job as a writer is to disappear. The reader isn't really supposed to remember you, they're supposed to be engaged with your story and you need to be as invisible as possible. But what some people end up doing, especially when they're beginners and they want to prove themselves, is they add in as many words as possible to make themselves look like professionals. So here's what a wordy scene would look like. There was an ear-splitting, unidentifiable crash. My heart rapidly beat in my throat as I waited on the corner for another possible sound to tell me that what I had heard was real. There was another creaking sound, the same as before. I clenched my fist tight into my hands and ran towards the repeated sound, too scared to make take any deep breaths. Okay, so there's a lot of extra words in here. They don't add anything to the scene. Part of the job of a writer is to know what words to put in and what words to leave out. If that word is not contributing anything to the pace, to the mood, to the scene, if it's not engaging the reader more in your story, you need to take it out. So that is my basic lesson on pacing. Like I said, it takes a lifetime to learn. There's a lot to it, but that is the beginner's snapshot of pacing. So let's do a quick recap. First of all, sentence lengths. Remember, each length has a purpose. Short sentences are for action, drama, and comedy. Long sentences are for descriptions, reflections, and flashbacks. And medium sentences are for character actions, linking everything together, and everything else. Pacing. You can improve the pacing of your writing by reading multiple genres, writing multiple versions of a scene or paragraph, highlighting your short and long sentences to see the balance or imbalance in your scene, and of course asking for feedback from an editor, a teacher, a good friend, etc. Common mistakes. Mistakes in sentence lengths will be repetitive lengths, using the wrong pace for a scene, and just using too many words. So that is the end of this lesson. I hope it was helpful. If it was interesting, if it was helpful, go ahead, give it a like. For my next lesson, I will be focusing on punctuation. So punctuation will include commas, semicolons, colons, em dashes, en dashes, periods, question marks. I'm going to show you how you use those well in creative writing. So if you're interested in how to use punctuation well in creative writing, go ahead and subscribe, and that video will be up soon. If you have any questions about today's lesson, go ahead and put them in the comments. If there's any topic you would like me to discuss on creative writing, also put that in the comments. Thank you for taking time with me today. I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Continue being beautiful beasts. I will see you tigers later. Peace.